Okay, before I begin, let's review or recap a little bit on what we have read so far. This week, for the past few days, we have entered into the first component of the Noble Eightfold Path, right view. We start with the introduction of right view, and then we entered into the first kind of right view, which is mundane right view. And then we went into dividing into three categories. The first one, the distinction between the unwholesome and the wholesome. The second one, the principal cases of each type, which are the 10 instances here. Destroying life, taking what is not given, wrong conduct in regard to sense pleasures, false speech, slanderous speech, harsh speech, idle chatter, covetousness, ill will, wrong view. Today, we are going to explore the third one, which is the roots from which these actions spring. So as usual, I will begin to read first, and then I will pass it to someone else. Actions are distinguished as wholesome and unwholesome on the basis of their underlying motives called roots, mula, which impart their moral quality to the volitions concomitant with themselves. Thus, karma is wholesome or unwholesome according to whether its roots are wholesome or unwholesome. The roots are threefold for each set. The unwholesome roots are the three defilements we already mentioned: greed, aversion, and delusion. Any action originating from this is an unwholesome karma. The three wholesome roots are their opposites, expressed negatively in the old Indian fashion as non-greed, aloba, non-aversion, adosa, and non-delusion, amoha. Though these are negatively designated, they signify not merely the absence of defilements, but the corresponding virtues. Non-greed implies renunciation, detachment, and generosity. Non-aversion implies loving kindness, sympathy, and gentleness. And non-delusion implies wisdom. Any action originating from these roots is a wholesome karma. Okay, I think firstly, maybe I define this one big words, concomitant. Okay, concomitant means naturally accompanying or associated. Okay. So, which impart the moral quality to the volitions concomitant with themselves, associated with themselves. Any other words that you want to be defined? Okay, if not, then I think we can continue first reading the next paragraph. How about Venice? Would you like to read?
Thank you, Master. Okay, start from the most important.
Yes.
The most important feature of karma is its capacity to produce results corresponding to the ethical quality of the actions. An immanent universal law holds sway over volitional actions, bringing it about that these actions issue in attributive consequences called vipaka, ripenings, and phala, or phala fruits. The law connecting actions with their fruits works on the simple principle that unwholesome actions ripen in suffering, wholesome actions in happiness. The ripening need not come right away. It need not come in the present life at all. Karma can operate across the succession of lifetimes. It can even remain dormant for aeons in the future. But whenever we perform a volitional action, the volition leaves its imprint on the mental continuum, where it remains as a stored-up potency. When the stored-up karma meets the conditions favorable to its maturation, it awakens from its dormant state and triggers some effect that brings due compensation for the original action. The ripening may take place in the present life, in the next life, or in some life subsequent to the next. The karma may ripen by producing rebirth into the next existence, thus determining the basic form of life, or it may ripen in the course of a lifetime, issuing in our varied experiences of happiness and pain, success and failure, progress and decline. But whenever it ripens and in whatever way, the same principle invariably holds. Wholesome actions yield favorable results, unwholesome action yield unfavorable results.
Thank you, Venice.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's a good time to stop and review what we have read, the first two paragraphs so far. The first paragraph talks about the roots of the actions. So it can be categorized into three for the unwholesome. So it's these parts. The unwholesome roots are the three defilements we already mentioned: greed, aversion, and delusion. And the opposite, if you express negatively in the old Indian fashion, in the language during that time, are non-greed, non-aversion, and non-delusion. So the first paragraph talks about the root. The second paragraph talks about the fruits or the results. So whichever the action springs from, if it's from unwholesome roots, then it will yield unfavorable results. If it is wholesome roots, if it is wholesome actions, it will yield favorable results. So it's summarized perfectly in this last sentence. So before I continue, firstly, any question, any comments for the first two paragraphs from anyone?
Maybe I was just thinking about something.
Mhm.
So I think the first part they were talking about was the greed, hatred, and delusion thing. So I was just doing a reading of the Kalama Sutta itself. So the Kalama Sutta is found in the Book of Trees. So most of the time, like, people will keep thinking about what is the purpose of the Kalama Sutta. So just for some context, the Kalama Sutta is the text that when the Buddha went to this place and then he spoke to a group of villagers who are called the Kalamas. Then after that, they asked him the question about why there are so many teachers that pass by our village. So who should we listen to? Some of them say that their teachings are more superior. So the Buddha was so confused. So the Buddha essentially just gave them an answer, and then the answer is like, don't go by tradition, don't go by all of these things. But the formula that he actually prescribed to actually this greed, hatred, and delusion. So whether the actions are going to lead to skillful or unskillful, wholesome or unwholesome, you should look at whether it leads to more greed, hatred, or delusion, or lesser. So to me, it's very interesting in the sense that maybe in a sense there are maybe 10 actions that are sort of being prescribed as what is considered as wholesome and unwholesome. But deeper underlying it is really whether the action in itself, when we do it, does it lead to more greed, hatred, and delusion? Perhaps in an instance where an individual is doing dana, can be so wholesome, an act that is so wholesome, yet maybe the mind is filled with greed I want this because I want to have, I can accumulate more karma so that, or whatever. And then it's a state of delusion. Then it wouldn't constitute to be something that is entirely wholesome. But really, it is the mental state, whether there's greed, hatred, and delusion. And I was like, and imagine if you're able to do so wholeheartedly without greed, hatred, and delusion, of course you're going to have happy results because you'll naturally be a happy mind. So yeah, this is something that I just wanted to share.
Yes, thanks a lot, Anjit, for sharing. Actually, yeah, when you bring up the Dana example, it was actually a good example. So, for example, if I give Dana, let's say, or even to a homeless guy, if I give some money to them, I can give them respectfully, or I can just get some coins and then throw it to the floor. And I think we can distinguish between these two, right? The act itself of giving is just an external action, but how wholesome it is depends on the roots, depends on the mind and the intention inside. So is that what you mean, Anjit?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and as a result, depends on how pure the intention is, and then it will lead to how favorable the results is, or how unfavorable the results is. Okay, that's a really good sharing. Thanks a lot, Anjit. Anyone else would like to have comments or even just a question on what we have read so far? Okay, Saikyang.
So when pertaining to that, like just now, whatever you and Anjit discussed, then I'm thinking that means when we perform, unwholesome action, we also can have wholesome intention. Remember, there's a story about the Buddha's past life in the ship or something like that. And although you know that killing that person who is going to kill the rest of the people is going to result in, it's an unwholesome action, but that is the only choice that he has to prevent the consequence. It's his out of compassion for that person, because he knows and he can see that that person's unwholesome action will lead him to hell results, kind of thing, and he is willing to, and he knows that that is unwholesome, he knows the result, and is willing to do that, with the good intention, I suppose.
Yes, I think this is a difficult question and can be tricky as well. From how I would see this is that, well, from that story, the Buddha still did suffer the consequences. He went to hell, but for a very short amount of time. They call it a bouncing ball. So the amount of time it takes to bounce a ball, that's the amount of time he went to hell. So he still suffer from the unwholesome act, but we can probably say the intention is pure or almost pure. But yeah, this is the moral, a classic moral dilemma that is tricky to answer. But what do you guys think? Does Anjit want to share something?
Can I share this part?
Yes, Jolene, please.
Okay, that's when I think the next para makes a lot of sense. Okay, every karma has a karma, and every karma has a seed. We call the seeds of karma. So we need to be careful that when we do that in every action, there are two things happening in our mind stream, and there's two karma fruits happening at the same time. So for example, like what Anjit say, the act of giving is called generosity. The person who actually gives the act of giving will have the merit of giving because you give joy to someone. So that is a meritorious action to do. And you will get some good merit for that. In return, you see a smile on somebody's face, somebody saying, thank you, and you feel so nice and you feel so consoled their action bring a smile on someone's face, or what you have given, give clothes to someone to wear on their body, a child wearing very dirty clothes, have clothes to wear. So that happiness you give others, that are merits. So we cannot discredit those actions of generosity. And then there's the seeds of karma, which means your intention. What does it lays in your mind stream for giving? So people lay some seed and say, I just want the happiness of others. So that lays a virtuous seeds. So it lays in a life stream. I do that so that somebody can continuously have happiness. So other people to say, I lay it so that I can get a lot of good merit, then my grandma, although it's a bit tinted, it might be to lay the seeds for a better being, for maybe on a more attachment basis. So they still lay a seeds, but their seeds is more like attachment. It leads to growth of your attachment to your loved ones. So you lay a seeds of attachment. So on every action, there are two levels we need to look at. So back to what the Buddha did, right? The Buddha have to kill someone, but he lay a seeds of saving more lives because that was his intention. So he killed, he has to suffer for that action that he did, and there was a karma for it. But when he laid the seeds of saving lives, that gives him another merit of saving a lot of lives in the future. So there were two levels in every action that we do. Yeah, so and that's why it could explain why we have to look at two things at all time in our action, because it has two types of karma in that sense. Yeah, it's like we call karma and seeds of karma. Yeah, in all our action. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jolene. Okay, all okay with this part? Okay, I think I want to finish the mundane right view. We just have 3 paragraphs left. So the next one to read. How about Sister Xinghui? Would you like to read?
To recognize this principle is to hold right view of the mundane kind. This view at once excludes the multiple forms of wrong view with which it is incompatible, as it affirms that our actions have an influence on our destiny, continuing into future lives. It opposes the nihilistic view, which regards this life as our only existence and holds that consciousness terminates with death. As it grounds the distinction between good and evil, right and wrong, in an objective universal principle, it opposes the ethical subjectivism, which asserts the good and evil are only postulations of personal opinions or means to social control. As it affirms that people can choose their actions freely within limits set by their conditions, it opposes the hard deterministic line that our choices are always made subject to necessitation, and hence that free volition is unreal and moral responsibility untenable.
Okay, thanks, Sister Xinghui. I think firstly, let's define 3 or 4 words over here. Nihilistic, I think it's a little, let's define nihilistic. Rejecting all religious and moral principles in the belief that life is meaningless. That is nihilistic view. Secondly, ethical subjectivism. That's 1. The doctrine that knowledge is merely subjective and there is no external or objective truth. Okay. There's the second one, postulations. Let's define postulations. A suggestion or assumption of the existence, fact, or truth of something as a basis for reasoning, discussion, or belief. Okay, the second definition is a little bit too abstract. I think the first one is more relevant to our context. What else? Necessitation, I think it's somewhere along the line of necessity. To make necessary or unavoidable. To require or compel. Anything else? Okay, if not, then Sister Xinghui, would you like to nominate the next person to read?
Can we have Sister Billy?
Some of the implications of the Buddha's teaching on the right view of karma and its fruits run counter to popular trends in present-day thought, and it is helpful to make these differences explicit. The teaching on right view makes it known that good and bad, right and wrong, transcend conventional opinions about what is good and bad, what is right and wrong. An entire society may be predicated upon a confusion of correct moral values, and even though everyone within that society may applaud one particular kind of action as right and condemn another kind as wrong, this does not make them validly right and wrong. For the Buddha, moral standards are objective and invariable. While the moral character of deeds is doubtlessly conditioned by the circumstances under which they are performed, there are objective criteria of morality against which any action or any comprehensive moral code can be evaluated. This objective standard of morality is integral to the Dhamma, the cosmic law of truth and righteousness. Its transpersonal ground of validation is the fact that deeds as expressions of the volitions that engender them produce consequences for the agent, and the correlations between deeds and their consequences are intrinsic to the volitions themselves. There is no divine judge standing above the cosmic process who assigns rewards and punishments. Nevertheless, the deeds themselves, through their inherent moral or immoral nature, generate the appropriate results.
Thanks, Sister Billy. So let me quickly define some big words. Transpersonal. Okay, the transpersonal is defined as experiences in which the sense of identity or self extends beyond the individual or personal to encompass wider aspects of humankind life, psyche, or cosmos. It has also been defined as development beyond conventional personal or individual levels. Such a big word. Okay, so in this context, it's transpersonal ground of validation. Okay. Any other big words here? Okay, if not, then the last paragraph. So Sister Dita, would you like to help to close the section?
For most people, the vast majority, the right view of karma and its results is held out of confidence, accepted on faith from an eminent spiritual teachers who proclaims the moral efficiency of action. But even when the principle of karma is not personally seen, it still remains a facet of right view. It is part and parcel of right view because right view is concerned with understanding. With understanding our place in the total scheme of things, and one who accepts the principle that our volitional actions possesses a moral potency has, to that extent, grasps an important fact pertaining to the nature of our existence. However, the right view of the karmic efficiency of action need not remain exclusively an article of belief screened behind an impenetrable barrier. It can become a matter of direct seeing. Through the attainment of certain states of deep concentration, it is possible to develop a special faculty called the divine eye, or dipachaku, a supersensory power of vision that reveals things hidden from the eyes of flesh. When this faculty is developed, it can be directed out upon the world of living beings to investigate the working of the karmic law. With the spatial vision, it covers one can see for oneself with immediate perception how beings pass away and re-arise according to their karma, how they meet happiness and suffering through the maturation of their good and evil deeds.
Okay, thank you, Sister Dita. So, any of you have divine eye here? Would you like to develop a divine eye? Then you have to practice hard if you want this kind of eye. Okay, firstly, any big words over here? Converse? What does converse exactly means? To grant. Okay. So with the special vision, with the divine eye, it will grant one to see for oneself, whatever is explained here. Yeah, so the last three paragraphs that we read, firstly, any comments? It starts with explaining again that holding right view of the mundane kind is to recognize the principle of karma. The second paragraph, it talks more about that this one is like, okay, let me find the sentence, is that it does not depends on the society whether the karma works or not, is in this sentence. I think this is a really good one. An entire society may be predicated upon a conclusion of correct moral values. Can you think of an example? You see, in some country, they eat dog and they think it's just fine, right? But you know, that society may think it's correct or there's nothing wrong, but this does not make them validly right and wrong. So I really like this sentence. Yeah. For the Buddha, moral standards are objective and invariable. Yeah. So that's the second paragraph. And the third paragraph is the concluding paragraph for this mundane right view. And of course, it talks about if you develop the divine eye, you can see for yourself that this is true. You can verify it for yourself. Yeah. So any question, any comments? Okay. If not, then we can wrap it up here for the reading. Tomorrow, we can start to dive into the second type of right view, which is superior right view. So today I'm going to do the sharing of merits a little bit differently. I would like to recite this verse. It's one of my favorite verses for sharing of merits. So please recite together with me. Akasata Jabummata Dewana Gamahidika Punyang Tang Anumoditva Jirang Rakantu Sasanang. Akasata Jabummata Dewana Gamahidika Punyang Tang Anumoditva Jirang Rakantu Desanang. Akasata Jabummata Dewana Gamahidika Punyang Tang Anumoditva Jirang Rakantu Mang Parang. Tawata Cha Amhehi Sambatang Punya Sampadang Sabi Dewa Anumodantu Sabha Sampati Siddhya. Etawata Cha Amhehi Sambatang Punya Sampadang Sabi Buddha Anumodantu Sabha Sampati Siddhya. Etawata Cha Amhehi Sambatang Punya Sampadang Sabi Sata Anumodantu Sabha Sampati Siddhya. Bawagupadaya Awajihe Tato Etantare Satakai Upapana Rupiya Rupicha Asanya Sanyino Dukkha Pamuchantu Pusantu Ni Buting. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Dedication of merits. 愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了，普愿罪障悉消除，实是常行菩萨道。阿弥陀佛。Thanks everyone for joining. I'm sorry I went over time, 12 minutes over time. So hope you guys enjoy it and have a divine day ahead.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Master.
Marcel.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.